Hi, I'm Atdhe. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate some of the IoT forensics tools and techniques. So I'm going to be focused mostly on the tool that is called Binwalk. Yes, Binwalk. The tool that is used mostly to extract and mount and browse all the informations and the structure of the data, evidence, potential evidence that would be already sitting within a firmware of that particular IoT device. That would be the thing that I'm going to cover all over this hands-on. And I'm going to use this environment, this Linux environment, in this case, that I'm going to show the Binwalk tool, how that is used to run a file signature scan, and then given that particular firmware file that I'm going to use for this educational and testing purposes. So let's summarize shortly about the tool of Binwalk. So Binwalk is a tool that we would be able to search a given binary file, image for that embedded files, and executable codes. And usually this would be mostly found within a firmware. So the firmware would be that file, that small file that would tell the device how to act and react and how to operate with all those already functionalities put it by the design by the manufacturers. So that would be the first thing that we're gonna do. So what we would need, so firstly, I would need for the firmware, which I already have. So I would have the firmware underscore ESP32. So that comes from that. So what I'm gonna need is just gonna need to open the terminal here. So since I'm in this location, or I would just navigate there, you would be able to do that either. Bring this in much better view, and let's have it this way. So since we're going to use a Binwalk, we're going to just name it the Binwalk. So the Binwalk would be that command that we're going to use, so we specify which tool. Since we would be, so let's first check what would be on this. We want to use this firmware, that is firmware underscore ESP32.bin. So we want to first, as a first step that we'll be using the Binwalk would be -E, which is extraction. So we want to extract this firmware file so that we want to make sure that that is extracted. Whenever we execute, that would extract for us, and you see that already created a default folder naming this way underscore and the name of the firmware. So that would be the first thing, and let's see that is there. So if we would step in onto this folder, we would see that this would be that whole structure that is already zipped. We can unzip that one, that the whole structure of this IoT device firmware. So that would be the very first step, the beginning, and then whatever comes next. So I already have this firmware already extracted, so I have it here, and I'm going to move it to this. So there's a payload here, and then the logs, configuration, and bin files. So if we would be trying to look in one or the other, we might be looking this way or the other way. So let's just show it to you. One of the things that would be used most of the time with the Binwalk, those are called strings. Those are filters that you can use keywords to search. So I use these command strings to see in the printable, human, readable view all about the strings that would exist inside the binary file. So if we would just use strings against this firmware file, we would be seeing all those strings that are already embedded in this binary file, but this would be the one that is already embedded. But let's check and see the other ones. So I'm just going to be on this path, or I will just navigate. So let's assume that we would be on this firmware, and this would be that real IoT firmware that we're going to use to extract more and looking this over the string. So if we would be able, so that would be showing us, we would be in this location where we would have the configuration files that would exist within this firmware, so the network configuration file and the JSON file that shows some sensors. So if we would type this kind of strings against this network configuration file, and we want to grab the password, so this would be the way that would show that actual keywords that would be interest for our digital forensics for IoT that we would be able. So there are a lot of those strings that we'll be able to use. So there is a group of strings that are for credentials, authentication filters, network and communications, system and file information. We want to know more about that file system and configuration, everything. And you can, all the times, you can combine those strings against those firmware that would serve you with some valuable information and potential evidence within all those files, instead of just going and browsing and navigating on each of those folders. If you would not have that chance to do so, you would just go over the terminal and use those strings against those files.